whenever we're talking about connected television, I think it's relevant to distinguish what it is exactly that we're referring to. In video and CTV, I think the spectrum can sometimes be a little bit wider than people might assume when we're really talking about the highest quality inventory, broadcast, long form, living room, lean back inventory. That's really what we're talking about when we reference CTV. It's the broadcasters and the programmers that we're all familiar with, the NBCs and the ABCs and the Disneys and the Paramounts, and these organizations that really put a level of investment in creating content that is of the most premium and the highest quality. When we're talking about CTV, that's really what we think of.
Actually, I was hoping maybe you could elaborate a bit more on that. Like, has the definition changed? This week we saw the launch of Disney Plus's ad-supported tier. Netflix came on board with all its inventory. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I think never in the history of digital have we ever seen such a material influx of new premium quality inventory into the marketplace, especially not in the context of CTV. And so with the entrance of Disney Plus and Netflix, I think we're seeing a boom within the overall supply and inventory opportunities for buyers, which is particularly exciting. All of which I think falls within our definition of that kind of premium quality standard of inventory. That being said, I think that there are many participants out there who would love to have their inventory characterized as CTV, recognizing the value that buyers place on it and correspondingly the CPMs that they place on it. That being said, the user-generated content, apart from the YouTubes and perhaps the Twitch TVs out there, there's a lot of user-generated. Everyone's got an iPhone. Everyone is in a position to create video content. That doesn't make it CTV quality. That doesn't make it aligned to a buyer's expectation of what premium inventory would be, akin to what they'd be familiar with buying on a linear basis. And so I think it's important that we make that distinction and clarify what we mean as an exchange when we reference CTV, because I think the interpretation of what CTV might be can be quite wide. And so we always want to be able to qualify or distinguish that premium, long form, and other qualifiers that I think really demonstrate that this is the type of inventory that aligns with that living room experience, that lean back experience, as I mentioned, and not that kind of shorter form, lower quality, often user generated type of inventory that may not necessarily align with what a premium advertiser is looking for when they think of television advertising experiences that they're looking for and looking to align their brands and their products with, and ultimately the audiences that are engaging with that type of content.
Now, you mentioned CPM, or cost per thousand viewers. What are some of the other ways that CTV buyers evaluate their marketing, their media investment, and specifically performance strategies?
Yeah, so I mean, regardless of the medium, I think for an advertiser, their marketing spend is ultimately aligned to an expectation or an outcome, a return on ad spend. And that is certainly true in the context of CTV. That level of investment, that ability to align with and ultimately reach a specific audience or a specific individual, and ultimately have an outcome be driven by that engagement. That's really what an advertiser is looking for. And so how do you connect that digital sort of experience, that ability to put a message, sight, sound, and motion in front of an individual, and then lead to a specific outcome, whether that's post-exposure digital outcome or offline outcomes. That's ultimately what I think the advertisers are interested. That could be the purchase of a vehicle. It could be entering into a brick-and-mortar store. It can be the sale of shampoo or deodorant, or a pair of shoes. At the end of the day, you ultimately want to have that specific outcome that leads to some type of a transaction, for the most part, or some kind of action being taken by an individual that marketer or advertiser is seeking to not only get that message to, but again, generate some kind of an action.
That's interesting. Now, finally, Alex, I was hoping you could just tell us a bit about what you expect to see, let's say, in the next 6 months to a year, and perhaps what challenges need to be solved in order to drive further value for marketers.
Yeah, I mean, what a great question. We are in unique times, to say the least. We're sort of hopefully tail end of the pandemic. We've got, record high inflation, and, general ongoing uncertainty in the economy. And so I think now more than ever, we see marketers learning that digital, or realizing that digital is really the answer to so many of the challenges that they are having to address and confront in this climate. Challenges related to, being able to measure effectively the outcomes of their advertising spend, being able to target as effectively and efficiently as they possibly can, being able to extend that reach, being able to create more value. All of these things are now, I think, becoming more and more relevant and important than they ever have been in light of these circumstances. And so we have that coupled with an incredible growth in streaming and consumption of streaming media. That was certainly accelerated throughout the pandemic. You have, as we mentioned earlier, an incredible amount of really premium quality supply entering into the marketplace. And so we have this confluence of factors that are leading marketers and advertisers to want to spend more and increase existing spends within this channel. In fact, just recently, the CFO of Procter & Gamble was quoted as saying that, beyond the 50% of spend that is currently going into digital, they see an opportunity to allocate even more to CTV in particular. Why? Well, because of the reasons I stated, because they have the ability to target better. They have the ability to reach the audience more effectively and reliably. All of these things, I think, as a result of just all these factors, are going to see more acceleration, more adoption as we move into 23, which I think is really exciting. Now, how do we ensure as a platform, as an industry, that we're able to capitalize on this opportunity? I think so much of that is contingent on embracing the standards that have been put forth by the IAB. We are very proud to have been directly involved with the development of the most recent OpenRTB Protocol 2.6, which finally have a very focused and organized approach to supporting the needs of CTV, specifically around podding, specifically around signaling. And so I think the media owners themselves have an obligation to consider how they can support that more effectively to then meet the needs and the demands of the advertiser. How do we improve signal quality? How do we ensure that the marketers can have the level of transparency that they're familiar with from a linear standpoint, and have that replicated within a digital standpoint? I think if we do that, we start to align expectations in really clear and specific ways that help contribute to the outcomes, again, that all participants are looking for. And so I think all of this sort of groundswell opportunity spells, a massive win for digital in the midst of a lot of, broader economic uncertainty. I think in 22, we will hit somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 billion in spend. I think the question we need to be asking ourselves is, how do we get to 50 billion and beyond before the end of the decade? We've got the opportunity in front of us. We've got the resources available. I think it's a question of pulling all of these things together, and we'll see all ships rise. I really do believe that. And we know what it's going to take to get there. I think as practitioners, as stakeholders and supporters of the industry, of the media owners, of the buyers, it's our responsibility to help educate and help everyone understand the steps that we need to take in order to achieve the full potential for this channel, for this space.